For the last year and a half, Ali has talked to you about this crusade in this country to censor books with content that conservatives don't find appropriate. But long before that, hip-hop music, which has its 50th anniversary this weekend, was the subject of similar censorship, oftentimes because the songs that were written told the truth about America's criminal justice system and shed light on the negative impacts that it has had on so many Black and brown lives. For more on this topic and to discuss the evolution of hip-hop at large, I am so excited to be joined by a superstar panel, including Bernard Freeman, who's also known as Bun B. He is a Grammy-nominated and pioneering hip-hop artist. He's also one half of the legendary rap group, the Underground Kings, which has paved the way for countless rappers in the South. He's added to his resume, the sole proprietor of Trill Burgers in Houston, Texas. Professor Mark Anthony Neal is chair of the African American and African Studies Department at Duke University. He teaches a popular course at Duke called The History of Hip Hop. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Harvard University. She is an attorney and a legal scholar and author of the very important book, Prophets of the Hood, Politics and Poetics in Hip Hop, which came out in 2004. Bun, thank you so much for being here, along with my other guests. I want to start with you. I want to get comfortable for this discussion because I'm super excited to have it. You came on the scene in the early 90s, a time in which government and law enforcement were frequently trying to censor hip-hop artists. Can you talk to our viewers about what it was actually like to be in the game at that time, and what are your thoughts now that you look back at that time with hip-hop turning 50?
Well, thank you for having me on today, Charles. In the early 90s, America was a very volatile place. Many communities were being ravaged by the crack epidemic. My community of Port Arthur was no different. And so we tried to vocalize the actual struggle of people in those communities on all sides, the user, the dealer, the community that had nothing to do with either. We wanted to try to vocalize what life was like on an everyday basis for people in those communities. But somehow a lot of that got construed as glorification of said environments. And I never understood why the messenger was always getting shot when trying to talk about an environment that they had to live in, that they had no hand in creating. It always just seemed like an overt reaction to young Black men speaking their truths. And I think that still exists to this day.
Dr. Perry, to pick up on that point, hip-hop is an art form. Rap is the cultural voice of hip-hop. But there's always been this repeated attempt to criminalize rap music and use the lyrics against those who perform them. In your book, Prophets and Poets of the Hood, you talk about while hip-hop is not seen as an art form, it becomes deprived of the kind of First Amendment protection and consideration ascribed to an art. Can you talk about what you meant when you said that?
Absolutely. It's this assumption, and you talked about it, that everything that an MC depicts is actually reflective of some event as opposed to being a creative work. And I think it's better to understand hip hop as actually, as Bun B said, as a reflection of a community's reality, but also aspirations. So hip hop may be 50 years old, but the social conditions and the creative response to them that it comes out of is much older. So policing as a primary, and law enforcement as a primary force in the maintenance of the racial order, the maintenance of Jim Crow, the domination of Black people, is part of our history, in many ways much more than protection. Black people's encounter with law enforcement has disproportionately been as a target of suppression. And so the creative response is actually a way to respond to the way we are characterized, the way Black people are criminalized. It tells a much richer story of our communities. And so it is really important that we speak. I'm so glad that you're doing this segment, because it's really important to give truth to the reality that we are often targeted by those who are supposed to be charged with protecting and serving our communities as well.
I say it all the time, hip hop is very much so about narrative, about cultural narrative. And as I was talking about the song, NWA song, F the Police in the Last Block, Mark, We know that that put the group on the FBI's radar back in '89, and the Bureau said that it was encouraging and advocating for violence against law enforcement, even though it was provocative and controversial. If you listen to the actual lyrics of what NWA was saying, it was calling out a larger, glaring facet about Black American life, that being police brutality. It seems like people were listening, but no one actually heard what was being said. What do you make of that?
What I always find amazing, and thanks for having me on today, Charles, what I always find amazing about that song is that they actually frame it as a court case. They frame it as the police being under indictment for acts. It doesn't advocate violence. It obviously does not. It's a group of young men saying, this is what we have seen systematically in terms of what the police have done to us. And they're precursors here, right? Even in LA, you can take a song like Toddy T's Batarram, which is literally about these little machines that the LAPD use to bash into doors of people who they suspected of being drug dealers. And when we think about what we call gangster rap, it really is a narration of the kind of bust and buy and bust strategies of the LAPD at the time of folks who were dealing drugs on the street, and not making a distinction between those folks who were engaged in the game and folks who were just hanging out, right? Because we know there's a longer history of the criminalization of Black youth just being on the corner if there's more than 2 or 3 of them, right? Hip hop comes out of that tradition of folks simply being on the street, coming together, congregating, and that act in and of itself, before we get a narrative about it, they're criminalized in that context.
Bun, as an MC, one of the things that you do as well as anyone else is you play with the English language. And one of the things that we know about rap music is that everything that is said may not necessarily mean what it does on paper. There are a lot of metaphors, there are a lot of entendres, there are a lot of double meanings. And as Black people, we are oftentimes neologists when we make up words or make new meanings for words. You are clearly aware of different instances where rappers' lyrical content has been used as evidence against them in criminal cases. And given what I just said about the use of language and how creative MCs are with it, how does that make you feel? And as an artist, where do you think the line needs to be drawn?
Well, I think that the problem is that many people who choose to criticize hip hop and more specifically rappers don't have the proper cultural entry point to the conversation. So it ends up being a lot of assumptions drawn by the listeners who really don't know how these people are communicating internally, right? You're basically people from the outside looking in. You don't have a glossary to walk you through this terminology. So whatever you hear or see, you determine it to be problematic off top, right? But that's because you see young Black people as problematic off top. You know, we create art, right? And art is and always has been a reflection of the world we live in. If there was no crime to speak to and we made these songs, they would fall on deaf ears. The reason they resonate with people is because these are real conditions that many people of color, unfortunately, have lived in and continue to live in this country.
It's Sunday and y'all are preaching. Dr. Perry, I want to go back to your book and explore another excerpt there. You wrote, quote, "The artist, in the effort to personify and testify, is in some sense trapped by that testimony. He or she becomes a target followed by police and put under scrutiny. To buckle into straight-laced respectability under such scrutiny might in fact seem like selling out the testimony." That's basically what we're talking about. Can you talk about that more deeply for us in terms of an artist, particularly rap artists, particularly MCs, having a difficult time separating their public persona or their art or who they are as MCs that are basically giving voice to narrative from who they are as people?
Right. I mean, I think this is part of what becomes complicated because there is pressure, right, to continue to seem as though one is hard, one is real, all of those pressures, so that even as an artist becomes incredibly successful, in order to be seen as legitimate by the core base of fans, there's a lot of so on the one hand you have the forces of policing and the surveillance state, and then on the other hand you have the expectations of a community. Oftentimes people want to test MCs, right? Are you really, are you really real? Do you really come from where you say you come from? So there's a real constraint that is produced for these artists. And I wanted, so part of what I wanted to point to was that reality. And also there is the pressure. I quote an elder, Brother Blue, who says, when the society you live in reviles you, you become the glorious outlaw. The pressure of that, of carrying the burden of creating music that makes people feel as though they can live out their fantasies of transcending circumstances is enormous. And so I think it's just important to acknowledge that reality.
All right, I've got to get in 2 questions in 2 minutes. Mark, hip hop has struggled, particularly rap music, for that actual critical acclaim to be accepted by as an art form, but we've seen that change most recently. Kendrick Lamar, for example, was awarded a Pulitzer for his work with his album Damn, and there have been other sort of recognition of hip hop as an art form. Can you talk very briefly about what actually prompted that new level of acceptance?
I think there are a few things. I think the biggest thing is simply to follow the money trail. Once folks understood how lucrative hip hop could be, hip hop in the late 1970s and 1980s, was thought as almost kind of a vanity project, right? It was like the surf music of the 1980s. When folks recognized the economic power that was behind folks who were consuming hip hop and the money that could be made, I think our feelings about hip hop shifted over that period of time. And so it's not surprising that in 2023, that when we think about rap music, we're essentially talking about pop music, and we see elements, the 5 elements, the 6 elements, however you describe it, of hip hop, revealed in almost every aspect of American life and increasingly global life at this point.
I could talk about this all day long, but unfortunately we are out of time. We have had 50 years of hip hop, and here's to 50 more. Bun B, Mark Anthony Neal, and Dr. Imani Perry, thank you so much